Alright, so as you can see, the dual carbs off the cafe, they came back to the bench. Had a little issue, got the bike to fire up, wasn't any problems with that, but I couldn't get the rear cylinder to adjust. And it turned out I had an issue with the threads on one of these aftermarket needles. So while I got it apart, I figured I'd make a little video and just talk about, the process of going through, cleaning them, things to check for. That way when folks are taking them apart, if it's maybe your first time or you're new to them, then it'll give you a little more confidence of things to look for. And then you'll have a little better success when you take them apart and put them back together. That way you won't be thinking crazy things like saying these dual carbs won't work for me and I'm going to switch to a single carb. Actually, I'm not opposed to the single carb, I'm just kidding. Change out to a single carb if you want a single carb, but do it because you want to, not because you feel like you have to. So we'll get set up with this video and see if we can walk through some of this stuff. Maybe it'll be helpful for somebody. First off, the number one thing when you're taking them apart, as you can see on the table, I got them separated out. So this is the front carb over on this side. So we'd mark it front. And this is all the rear stuff. And you don't want to mix those up because there's little differences that you might have in them. Like for example, the emulsion tube, sometimes you get the emulsion tube that has 3 holes standing up. And then other times, the emulsion tube is going to have 4. And we'll talk a little bit more about these little holes and their importance when we get down here to the fuel height. But you don't want to mix these things up, especially if the carbs haven't been apart or the bike was running and you're just doing a cleaning. Because you might find yourself trying to figure out which one went where and then not knowing. So keep everything on front to the front, everything in the rear to the rear. The biggest thing that when you're taking them apart is, if Yamaha went to the trouble to drill a little tiny hole in it, they must have had a reason for it. And if they had a reason for it, it probably needs to be cleaned. So the biggest thing you got to do, other than a lot of little things and checks, is make sure that you got every hole cleaned, all the cross drillings are clean. And so what I want to do is just kind of show you, hopefully we'll be able to see on the cross drillings, because they go to different places on here and each one of them is very important. So we'll start at the bottom. This little guy right here, this is for the choke circuit, and what it does is it picks fuel up out of the bowl and takes it up and takes it over and drops it out here into your choke. And so there's a little line for fuel that goes into the choke, and then there's a big hole that's the air for the choke. And the big hole for the air comes around to the back. This is actually not a choke circuit, it's an enricher circuit. And so when you think about a choke circuit, you think it's choking off the air. This one's actually not choking air, it's adding more fuel. And so what happens when you pick the little plunger up, a little choke plunger, what it does is opens up and it adds fuel across, but it also adds air across. And so the only way you can get the air and the fuel coming through the choke is to actually have the throttle closed. So when you're choking one, it does no good to turn the choke on and then open the throttle, because the air just flows straight through the carburetor. It doesn't flow around the choke circuit and it won't pull any fuel in. So the only way you can choke one of these, which is actually enrich one of these, is to leave the throttle closed and then open up the choke handle or the enricher. For this one actually gets fuel down from the bolt. And so one of the places that folks don't realize is that little guy goes down in this hole right here. And this hole has to be able to get fuel into it, because what happens is if you can't get fuel in there, then there's no fuel on the end of that little stinger that goes up to the choke circuit. So with air in there, the choke circuit is actually going to pull air and more air, and you're not going to get any fuel. So it's not going to work on the choke, and in fact it may allow air to go by in the choke circuit, which is going to change your air fuel mix. So the first one you want to check for cleaning, and you'll see the carburetor clean, is if put it down into here, and when you put it in here it ought to come out there. And so you spray this one and you'll see it come out the top of that one. If it doesn't, there's a teeny tiny hole down in there, and what I use for all the holes is actually, you can get it from the big box hardware store, it's this safety cable for garage doors, and it's got tiny little strands in it. And I like it because if it's a big jet or a big hole, I can pick up a couple of them, or I can just untwist one, and it's got little curlies, and so you can get the curlies to go down in there, and when you put them down in the hole, it'll actually scrub the sides. So I use that stuff versus guitar wire or anything like that. It's cheap, easy to get, and it's adjustable because you can keep a few of them or just use one. So this guy goes up and he runs over and it comes out here. So when you spray it, let me get my little attachment here. So when I spray this one with the carb cleaner, I'll get fuel out of here. And so if you're not getting fuel out of there, then you're going to have to soak the carb. So we would spray that up in there, and you'll see the fuel. You saw a little drip come out. You'll see the fuel come out of that one right there. So that tells you that your choke circuit's clean and there's not any issues with anything trapped in there. The air portion of that circuit is really big. It comes back here, goes up, goes through that cross tube that you can take out, and it comes over here. So there's minimal chance that that one's going to get stopped up, but you can run some cleaner through it if you wanted to. So that gets rid of the choke circuit for us. So we got it all cleaned out. So then let's move up to the top. So after you take the diaphragms out and you take all of that off, up top there's a tube that crosses over. You got to take it loose. Down inside of there is two jets. So these are the air jets that either run air down for the idle circuit, or they run air down for the emulsion tube. And so you'll see them right here. One's big and one's little. The little one is actually the air for the emulsion tube. And what it does is allow air to flow in. The air comes into the emulsion tube on the the air comes into the emulsion tube on the outside, flows through these little holes, and pulls the fuel back up. And what it does is it atomizes the fuel, or makes it little tiny bits of fuel. That way when it comes into the cylinder, it'll burn. And so with that one stopped up, if that one does get stopped up, he's pretty small. If it gets stopped up from crud, then you're not going to get any air pulling up into your emulsion tube, and you're not going to get any fuel on the top end when you come off of idle. And so he's really important. But a little word to the wise, when it comes to these two up here, you can try to take them out, and I'll try to take them out like I took one out of these. If they won't come out, I would just leave them in there, because the jet is actually the most restrictive part. And so for that little jet, you just want to get you a piece of wire and just verify that you can get it through the jet. The one on this side for the idle circuit is a really big one, so there's very minimal chances you're going to get stopped up. So if we wanted to see if that one's clean or not, when I spray carburetor cleaner in here, it ought to come out inside of where the emulsion tube goes. So if I hold that just right, you might be able to see it, and it's going to come out right down there in the center part. So you can see it come out right inside of here. There's a little hole for it. So we know that jet's clean. The big air jet, when you blow through that one, when you put it in there, it's pretty big. You're going to get carburetor cleaner go into it, and it's actually going to come out the idle jet hole, and it's going to come out the mix needle hole, and it should also come out of the oblong hole up here, and it also should come out of the mix needle hole. So you'll get carb cleaner out of both of those holes and both of these when you spray it down into the air circuit. So if I spray in there, then you're going to see it come out of both holes right here. So you can see it. And then also, if I flip it over and spray it, it's going to come out the bottom too. And so that tells you that that air circuit is clean as well. Alright, so those are the two that come down the sides right here. They go down to the bottom. That pretty much cleans out all of the jets on the top end. You can verify that all of that's working. And then the last one is here on the mix needle, if you cover up the hole for the mix needle, you ought to get fuel back out here when you spray it in. You see it coming out right there. So you'll get those two crossover in the middle. And that's pretty much all of the holes, except for the choke circuit hole, but we already sprayed through. That one just goes straight down into the carburetor's mouth, and you'll see it come out on this side over here. So there we go. So once all of those are clean, that's pretty much all of the holes that you need to have, so we know that everything's cleaned up. Now we can worry about the little pieces and the parts. Alright, so we started talking a little bit about the choke circuit on it, and like I say, this is the pickup where the tube goes down in, and that's where it pulls its fuel up for the choke circuit. And so I also mentioned that you don't want the choke circuit really high, like opened up, and that you have to have the throttle closed in order to make the choke circuit work. But one of the things that gets us a lot of times on this choke circuit is that if you don't take this little guy out when you're doing your cleaning, there's actually the end of it is made of rubber, and that's the main seal for the choke. So if this guy's damaged, or if it's leaking, or if it's missing where somebody forgot it and put it down in the soak and then it ate a lot of it away, this choke circuit is going to constantly allow air and fuel to come over. And so being able to adjust the thing is just almost impossible because you got all that uncontrolled air and fuel coming through. But these guys need to be nice and clean, and I usually just wipe them off, get all the dirt off of them, make sure that that's not damaged or cracked, and then spray it off and then put it back in there. So nothing big about these. They have two sets of springs. This is the air seal, this is the fuel seal. This whole thing picks them both up and allows the fuel and air to flow, but that's why you don't want to pick them up a long ways, is because you're just going to get a ton of air and a ton of fuel, and it's just going to flood that motor. So I always try to find that sweet spot when it just starts picking these guys up, and then that's all you need for choke pretty much. I don't know of any day I've ever had to pull that thing over to full choke to get the bike to start. It's always just right on that little sweet spot of the choke. And like I said, it's actually an enricher, so we call it a choke just because that's pretty generic, but it's actually an enricher circuit, so understanding that kind of gives you a better feel for what that does. And it's not like choking the air off on a small engine where you put it on full choke, give it some throttle and crank it up. It works kind of backwards. You can't open the throttle when you apply the enricher circuit, or it just really doesn't do anything because the air doesn't want to go into the enricher side and pull the fuel along with it. And so now we're starting to look at some parts just to kind of see what everything looks like. So next on the list is looking for tears in the diaphragm. So this is another one that gets us. These diaphragms get kind of old and they're really fragile. Yeah, so what you got to do is just look and make sure you don't have any little tears or any little pinholes in them that's going to keep that air from balancing right on the diaphragm when it lifts up. If you do have some, you can probably put a little bit of I wouldn't say super glue, but some type of rubber cement to get you by till you can get some more. But you got to make sure that there's no leaks in those diaphragms. And so that's a critical one that usually gets a lot of people if you got some bad diaphragms. The other one we'll talk about is the diaphragm seating. Now here is the reason why I ended up having to take these carbs back off, because I went to tune it. Front cylinder came in fine. Rear cylinder I just couldn't get it to fine tune. It would start, and it's the one I actually had in my video kicking it over, so I could kick it over, it would fire up, but I just couldn't throttle the bike up because it acted like it was just flooding. Pull the plug, rear cylinder's black, so I know it's getting too much fuel. So the problem I had was this little aftermarket needle right here, and it looks just almost exactly like the OE needle. And so here's an OE needle, and you probably can't even tell the difference on video. I can barely tell the difference with a set of calipers. But what happened is the threads on this aftermarket one are cut too deep, and when I put it into the carburetor, it would actually bind on the thread because the little spring that goes in there kind of gets it a little crooked as it compresses in, and it would bind up, and then it wouldn't go any further, but it felt like it was seating. And so I wasn't getting a seat. And so let me show you real quick with the OE one. So if I put the OE one in the carburetor, so there's a soft seat, so it doesn't turn anymore, but I can back it up. So when I have it at a soft seat, you can actually see that it sticks up out of there. It's very visible sticking up out of that hole. And that's what made me realize when I took them back apart, when I had it on a soft seat, I couldn't see the tip of that needle. And so that's what that should look like on a soft seat. So if you're dealing with aftermarket parts, then there may be a case like this right here to where you buy an aftermarket needle and it's just not made right, and it's going to throw you off because you can't really tell. You know, if I hit seat right there, you can't see it, and so there's no way of knowing was that on the thread or not once it's on the bike. So that's the first one that gets us with aftermarket parts, but there's other things too. So for example, this is the seat for the valve that shuts off the fuel as it comes in. And so this is an aftermarket one, but you can see that the little spring thing is much shorter than, say for example, this aftermarket one. It's much taller. So when you go to set your fuel height, you got different variables in here as well. So if you do a change out and you swap out different aftermarket parts, or you have an OE one or something like that, you can't expect that that float is going to be at the same height, because these things aren't always made the same way. And so the same for this. If you just change that washer, if that washer's thicker or thinner, it's going to change the height of the float because it changes the location of the seat. So when dealing with aftermarket parts, you really got to go back to the basics and get your height set physically and not try to gauge it off the float height and do things like that, or else it's going to cause you a lot of problems. So as far as cleaning goes, while I got this in my hand, when you take these off, there's a little filter screen right here. That gets stopped up. That's where the fuel comes in from the tank. So it'll get stopped up just from crud coming down from the tank. And so you got to pull these guys off and clean those little screens out when you put them back together. That'll get you a lot of times wondering why you're not getting enough fuel flow. It's because like that little screen is stopped off. Then finally, when it comes to aftermarket parts, anytime you're getting things like the jets or emulsion tubes, if you can find them. And so this is one of the jets. This is a OE jet. So it's stamped 122. That's the OE for the stock setup on this. Some companies, they'll sell you a 122 jet and it actually matches the hole. It's supposed to be 122 would be the dimensions of the hole inside. But sometimes they have their numbers different depending on where you buy them from. And the hole might be the same size as this, but it's like a 60 or a 200. And so the jet numbers you got to be really careful about and make sure that when they're selling the jet, that they sell the jet number that says it matches to the OE. And there's a couple websites out there that say that they match their numbers exactly, Yamaha's numbers, Honda's numbers, etc. when they're selling their jets. But be careful with your jet numbers, because you really don't know. You buy the jet, you put it in there, and then the bike won't run, and then you're left wondering, okay, what did I do wrong? Because you changed the jets, you probably changed the seat, you probably changed, you know, all of these things, and you set your fuel height. Now you don't know which variable you got. Kind of like what got me with that aftermarket needle. So you really got to watch aftermarket parts. Make sure that you're getting your parts from people that say that they match up, and make sure that you test them out physically to make sure that they're going to do what they need to be doing. Here's a little odd one as we walk on down through things that have got me in the past. These are the springs that are on top of the diaphragms. So when you put the diaphragm in, you put your spring in. And so you'll notice it's nice and pretty and the curls are all consistent. Well, one of the carburetors that I got, actually the spring looked like this. And so for some unknown reason why, I don't know if it was a mistake or whatever, but whoever had that particular parts bike before me stretched this spring out. Now I don't know why they would do it, but it's all stretched out. So this spring is no good, because now it's changed the compression that it does to the diaphragm, and so it's going to throw your diaphragms off. So if you end up pulling one out and you're like, it's just a spring, it'll be alright. These springs are actually very important that they are consistent, and then they're also the right lengths. And so you might have to find yourself a new spring, like I'll be finding if I ever decide to use this other carburetor. I'm going to have to get another spring for it. So as we work our way on through, other things that can get you is like the air pipes. So you got these little air pipes that allow the air to come into the top of the carburetor, and they run over the top of the diaphragm. Well, if you think about what's up there, if this guy is connected right here, say for example, that air coming in needs to be clean, because if it's dirty coming in here, guess what? That little bitty jet right there that goes down to the emulsion tube to provide air is going to get stopped up, because it's sitting down in that nice little pocket right there. And many a times when I've taken them apart, there's this little black cruddy stuff that's collected up. One little piece gets in that jet, bam, carburetor shuts off, bike won't run. Well, what that little stuff comes from is inside of here are some little filters. And over time, now it's been 40 years, right, since this thing was made. Over time, that little foam filter starts disintegrating in there, and what it's doing is all those little pieces of foam are getting sucked down into the carburetor, and bam, they go right down in that top jet. So one thing I make sure I'm doing is blow these things out. And so what you want to do is blow them out, and maybe there'll be something come out, I don't know, we'll see. Because I've already cleaned this one. But you blow those out and make sure you don't have anything in there. I wouldn't spray carb cleaner in them, because that's going to eat that little gas or that little filter in there. But blow them out and see if you can't get as much of that particulate out of there as possible. That way you don't have that stuff going down into the carburetor. When it comes to putting the diaphragms back in, after you, let's say you got starting to put it together, so this is my front, this is my rear. The carburetor with the straight end is the rear carburetor. So I'm going to go ahead and just set the emulsion tube in there. And that way I can put my diaphragm in. So when you put your diaphragm in, you want to line that tab up for an OE one with the little tab slide. It's really important that you get the orientation right. But when you put the diaphragm in, make sure that it stays in that little groove. Sometimes I even use adhesive spray and I'll rub it around with my fingers and set it in there, but somehow that has to get in there and stay in there all the way around until you put that lid down. If it doesn't, the diaphragm's not going to work. So that is crucial that you get that down in that groove. And like I say, sometimes I'll even take contact cement for these that have been sitting out. Like this spray adhesive, take that spray adhesive and spray it on my finger and just touch around the bottom of it, not a ton, just right around the lip of it enough that it'll stick down. That way I can get it stuck down and get that lid on it before it pops back up. So the diaphragms are really critical, and if you bend one, it messes them up. It's awfully hard to get them straight again. So the best thing to do is just make sure you get those diaphragms in there right the first time. That way you don't have to worry about it. And when I set them down, I usually set them down like this and just kind of collapse them. That way I don't have them getting bent. This one's sitting over, he fell over. But you can see what happens when they fall over. They get kind of warpy, and it makes it that much harder to get them in there. So it's best just to set them up like that. And so now we're ready to start doing the reassembly. So first off, you want to do, and there's a video out on the channel for how to do the bench sink, so I'm not going to go through all that. Like I say, I've already had this one apart, so it's close enough. I haven't done the final sink on the bike yet because I couldn't get it to run good enough to do a final sink because these dumb aftermarket parts. But as soon as I get it on there, I'll be able to do my final sink, but I'm really close right now. And so what I do is, like in the video, you just put it up underneath, close it down, and you want to make sure that it'll just pull out and just push in. And then you do the same on the other one. And make sure it just pulls out and just pushes in. So this is 3/1000ths pretty much right here for this piece of paper. And that's just right at the point that you'll get a decent idle when you come off. If you go any higher, you know, you want to use big pieces of wire or something like that, you're going to end up having to crank it down. So it's nice to use something that's right about the setting of the idle. That way you can adjust the stop over on the rear carburetor, and you'll have it pretty close. So let's say I double it up, you can see the difference. So this would be 6/1000ths, and see, I can't get it out, so it's stuck in there. So if I pull it, See, it actually pulled my little piece of paper in half. So there's my little pieces of paper. So right around 3 thousandths, which is about as thick as a piece of paper. And like I say, there's a video out on the channel for how to go through and do that, adjust this, how to adjust your center link. And then there's also a video on the final sync once you get it running, tune it in with some manometers or some gauges if you have some gauges. Since it's 2 carbs, you can do it with just a manometer, like a fake setup manometer. Now the fuel height, we talk about the fuel height a lot. You know, we said the aftermarket parts affect it, but the fuel height is really, really critical. And one of the reasons why is because of these little emulsion tubes. So for the emulsion tube, as you can see, it has those little holes in the sides. So if you look at a carburetor, let's say it's sitting down like this, and I want to see where those holes are. So if I set the emulsion tube right at about the height of where it's going to sit in the carburetor, if you look, you can see those tubes right here. The little hole is just below where the bowl connects up. And what you want to have is these little holes all need to be down in the fuel, because when the air comes to the outside and goes through the hole, if there's no fuel there, it's just going to pull the air right through. So you're not going to get the right fuel mix. So it's important to have these little holes covered up with fuel, which means it's important to have the fuel set right in the height of the bowl, because that little hole right there is just right about there. Now if you have, these have 3 holes. If you have an emulsion tube that has, say, 4 holes, if you look at that one and you set it right there, the 4th hole is right at the line. I mean, it is just right there on the line. And so you got to be really, really careful with any of them that have 4 holes in them, and make sure you're just spot on with that fuel height being right there where the top of the bowl is, in order to get that last hole right there underneath the fuel. If not, it'll pull air through there and you're not going to get the right mix on any of these that have the 4 little holes right there. So fortunately for me, both of mine for this setup, they have 3. This was off of this parts carburetor, and so I'm going to leave him off because I don't think I need the 4th hole anyway for the setups that I'm running. And so that's why the fuel height is really, really important. So when you do your fuel height, as you set it up, like right here, so when I set my fuel height, I want to have it setting, because that emulsion tube is right inside of there. I want to make sure that with the carburetor leaning, that I'm right here up to the connection of the top of the bowl. If not, I'll pull air into that emulsion tube, and then I'm going to be pulling air, and I'm going to get my air fuel mix off. So the best way to do that is with the little tubey thing. Like I say, there's another video on that. I use a clear tube and just hook it over, put it right on the bottom of it, and then stand it up like that. And then when you open the screw up, the fuel will come in and it'll come up and it'll tell you the height. As long as you don't have any air bubbles in there, then that'll tell you your height exactly on the outside of what's on the inside. Just make sure you don't have any air bubbles. So then the last thing we got on our list, after we've done everything, cleaned the carbs, put them all back together, real careful not to crack anything, break anything, mess up anything, is just the simple setting of the mix needle. And so for me, when I start them out, after I got everything tuned up and everything's right, then I want to set my mix needle at about 1.5 to 2 turns out. What that does is gives me enough fuel to get started. It's not so rich that I have trouble with it flooding. It's not so lean that it's gonna kick and not run. So I usually go about 1.5 to 2 turns out on that mix needle, and I have pretty good success with that. You may have to play a little bit, but that's a good place to start. just another final thing to check when you're doing your builds is up inside right here where these come in if you're using the stock air system. Up inside of here is supposed to be these little rubber things. They go inside the tube, and as you can see, they're just full of crud. When the bike, you know, it's like a rebuild bike, all the stuff is in there, and so all of that's going to get sucked down into your carburetor. So you want to get all that cleaned out. You can't really clean inside the frame really well, but you can clean these guys off really good, and they'll tend to stop a little bit of that because it'll sit around the edges of it instead of going down the throat. So there's one on this side. These need to be inside of there because they restrict the air down a little bit, and if you're tuning the bike, you're going to need your air tuned right. So this guy goes on this side, and then on the left side of the bike is also one in there, and it's kind of a curl. Alright, so our carbs are back on. Got them back adjusted. So now let's see if she'll fire up for us. There we go. Now she's hitting on too. Well, alrighty. Well, thanks for watching.